Hi everybody, welcome back from the break. We're talking about the future, but I'm going to talk about the past as well. If you have ever encountered this in Google Chrome, you're trying to go to a website and you're offline and you get this little dinosaur jumping around. This is a game in the browser. If you know it, it's fun to do, but it's not really an experience you want to have your users have. So because this is the dinosaur, when your browser dies, you get this, and that's okay, but not for your end users. I'm Rowdy. I built my first website in 1996, so I'm more or less a dinosaur myself as well. I'm currently a front-end focused senior DevOps engineer, or like I try to add some titles along the way every day. I think I'm now a front-end focused full-stack senior DevOps engineer with special attention for accessibility and usability. If you know another one, let me know afterwards. Why not more titles? And I'm also a Google developer expert in web technologies. One part is about PWA. A small part of PWA we're going to use in this talk. And also for Project Fugu that makes it possible to do different things with your browser, like Web Audio API and Web Media API, a talk I did yesterday. Was there anybody at that talk yesterday? Oh, not anybody, there were more people. I'm not gonna make music, I'm not gonna do push-ups, I'm not gonna run around or whatever. This is gonna be more calm. But I do show a lot of code. Thank you for being there yesterday. So, let's start with some starter code. For instance, I have an indexed HTML file that is just boilerplate, essentially. I have a title, I have an image, some text and some links in it. It more or less looks like this. So if you scroll this, you see I have some links to the movies. You can click on a link and you get a movie synopsis. If you haven't seen the movies yet, don't read it, because it will spoil it for you. But this is more or less what it is. Nothing very serious. We want to do some fun stuff, and one of the things we want to use are service workers. And service workers are part of the whole PWA, the Progressive Web App name, let's say. It's a part of it. But what is it essentially? It is a plain JavaScript file. If you've run JavaScript before, this is nothing new for you. The difference between a JavaScript file that's attached to your website is that this one runs in a separate non-blocking thread. So your website will just continue with the most speed it can have, and the service worker will be next to it, not interfering with it. Because it's not interfering, it is still scoped to your website, so it can't access another website. It's still part of your website. But it can't modify it. It doesn't have access to the document object model. It is asynchronous, so you need to use promises or async await. You'll see that in the code later on. And most importantly, it's event-driven, so it listens to things that happen during the lifetime of that service worker. The support is great. This is already a little older screenshot, but it's great. I did this talk before, and then I still had to deal with this, IE, but that one is gone last year already, so no worries, you don't have to make sure that it's supported or not. It is. Let me try to explain you visually what a service worker can do. So, for instance, on this side we have the browser. So this Velociraptor, I can't pronounce it. Velociraptor is the browser. In the middle, we have the service worker controlling stuff. On the right-hand side, we have the server. And in the middle is some more JavaScript that's just on your website. So let's say the browser wants to go to the server to get some data. It will be going through the service worker. And at that point, the service worker can say, well, thank you, but I just ignore it. Or it can say, well, here is an answer. And in this case, it will say, I just pass it through to the server. Well, the server responds to that request of the browser. We'll send something back. And again, the service worker can say, well, I just pass it through to the browser back, or I give something back, or I manipulate stuff, or whatever. It's in full control in the middle. In this case, let's say we just pass it back to the browser. So it's essentially a man in the middle, but a good one. The one you have control over. And if we want to create a service worker, this is how you could start. I'm creating a sw.js file, a service worker JavaScript file, with two events that we are listening to. The install event and the activate event. Both will happen if a service worker is loaded. You can still see I'm checking whether a service worker is available. I'm going to make sure that at the next talk I'm going to strip that first if statement out of there because it's not needed anymore. But in a separate app.js file that will be in our HTML file attached, we're going to say, well, if this file is loaded, or more or less if the page is loaded, we're going to register the service worker file. If that works, in this case, we're just going to write something to the log saying, well, it's registered, and otherwise we'll write an error to the registry. So in our index.html file, we're going to use that app.js file that will make sure that the service worker file is loaded. Small example. So I'm going to refresh. You can see already that it's installed, registered, and activated. And you can see here that it has now version number 0. But it doesn't do anything yet. Let's first start with some static cache. And with static cache, I mean files that we already know of that will be beneficial for our users to have available at all times as soon as possible, like a CSS file or an image or some SVGs or whatever. By the way, there's a URL underneath every step. We have 10 steps to go to. In the end, there will be a QR code as well that you can go to, but every step I'm showing here has its own branch in this GitHub project. So you can go through it step by step yourself. So in our service worker, I'm going to create a variable called static cache with, in this case, version number static v1. I have an array of files that for me is like, these need to be available as soon as possible, and we can cache these files. So also a FAF icon and also some JavaScript as well. Next step is that we're going to listen to the install event. We already did that, right? We would write down service worker installed. But after that, we're going to say, well, okay, we're going to wait until we open all the static caches with that version number. And if the static cache is not there yet, it will create it for you. So open means open or create. And we're going to add all that files that are in our array. And at the end, we say we skip waiting, because normally these files, this process will only be available if the user comes for the second time or reloads the page for you. So if we do skip waiting, it's available immediately. And then in our load event, we're going to say, well, we have also an event or an attribute called onUpdateFound. So when we have a new service worker, we want to make sure that we're going to show a message to the user saying, well, hey, we did something new. Do you want to load this? Because the only way the user can have benefit of it if they visit it again or they reload the page in this case. So we want to make sure that we show a message to the user saying, hey, there's a new version. Do you want it? You could also do window.location reload without warning the user, but that could be very annoying when it's already, when the user already is scrolling through the page and then it's like refresh and starts over again. So I like to do this. Let's see how that works. It's going to refresh. You can see the message now. There's a new version. Would you like to load it? And if I say OK, it's so fast that you don't even see it loading. But it's refreshed, and you can see all the files in our static v1 cache. So this is available from now on. But we need to use it, right? We're only saving it now, and we're not using it. So we're going to use the fetch API. The other one was the cache API. This is the fetch API. Because if we reload page, you can see that we have sizes there. And that means we're still getting them from the network. So what we're going to do in the service worker, we're going to add a new event listener. In this case, we're going to listen to the fetch event. And the fetch event will make sure that it will try to match it with what's already in the cache. And if it's there, it will return that immediately. Otherwise, it will go to the server and still get that file. So this is what caches.match does. It will look at the URL. If it's the same, you get the immediate response. I'm going to show you how that works as well. We're going to refresh the page again so we can get a new service worker. So let's refresh. You can see you get the message again, and service worker number 2 is there. All right. If you go to the network tab now, you can see everything came from the service worker. And I don't know if you looked at there the load time, but if we compare that, the first time it was 35 milliseconds, but that's on my high-end MacBook and not from a real server. So if you have a bad connection, a slow connection to a slow server, this could take maybe 3-4 seconds before you got this back. If you do it from the service worker, it's 18 milliseconds, more or less always. Maybe a little bit slower if you have a slower laptop or a less high-grade laptop, but still it will be way faster than going from network. And it's more or less this sensation. That was just an excuse to take a sip of drink. But that's all nice, right? We now have these files for the first page that were all grabbed from the cache. But what if you are, for instance, in the Netherlands on a train and you come to the center of the country, the 4G or 5G isn't that great. So you can have a spotty connection. And that means that you are surfing away to another page, maybe on that website, and it will show you that dinosaur again. So let's fix that. Let's make sure that we care about the user and inform them what's going on. So, as I mentioned, if you go to this page again, it's from the service worker, and I can go to another page. No worries, nothing going on. But if I go again to application service worker and click the offline button, you can see that if I now refresh the homepage, it's fine. It's in our cache already, in our static cache. But you can see this page wasn't. So you don't even get the dinosaur, by the way. So you don't even get the treat of playing. Because you can see that it tried to fetch it, but yeah, there's no connection. All right, let's fix that. And we start simple by creating an HTML page that's called offline.html. Also, again, more or less boilerplate, a title, an image, and some text in there. It's like, sorry, page isn't cached yet. Why don't you try one of our others? And that will redirect you back to the home page. To make sure that the offline HTML is always available as well, we have to put it in the static cache, of course. We also bump the version number of the cache. And I'll explain in a little bit why. So you've already seen this. the fetch event in the service worker. If we find a file in the cache, then we return it, otherwise we go to the network. But what if the network is not there? What if we can't reach the server? Well, there's a solution for that. We can add the .catch here. So in the case we can't get that file from the server, we get in this catch statement. And what we then can do is go to the static cache and say, well, hey, something went wrong, but just give me the offline HTML. Well, however, it could also be that, that your browser is trying to fetch a CSS file or a JavaScript file or an image. It doesn't really make sense to give offline HTML back because that can get really weird results. So we add an extra if statement, just saying, well, if the headers of that GET request contain text HTML, then we're only gonna give back the offline HTML file. And again, let's see how that works. So we're gonna refresh, we get a new service worker again. Don't look at the numbers because I had to do it multiple times. This is number 1 now. So it's gonna be refreshed. You can see I have a static v1 and a static v2 now. Only the static v2 has the offline HTML. This is not ideal, but we're gonna deal with it. I'm going offline, and I'm going to the Jurassic Park page that wasn't cached yet, that wasn't in our static cache. And now you get more or less a nice page saying, well, hey, sorry, something's wrong. Maybe it's you, maybe it's us. All right, but that's only now, the cache is only working for the home page. That's not nice, because usually a website has more pages, right? So let's look at dynamic caching. Again, we are declaring a variable with a name, in this case dynamic v1, in our service worker. And we're going to add something extra in our fetch event again. So between the return of the fetch, if it works well, and the catch, we're going to add something extra. We're going to say, we're going to use a promise here and going to say, well, hey, if you fetch it from the server, we're going to also open or create the dynamic cache. And we're going to put anything you just requested inside the dynamic cache as well. You can see I'm using cache.put with rest.clone. That's very important to clone the result of the server, because otherwise you have nothing to return to the browser itself. So you would cache it, but the user won't see anything until the next time. So that's just something you have to be aware of. And again, let's see how that works. So I'm refreshing a new service worker, gonna load the new version. And if I go now, for instance, to the first movie, you can now see dynamic v1 was created. And within there, I only cache the HTML file and the JPEG, because anything other I already have, like the JavaScript that's also used here. And I can do another one, the 1997 one, The Lost World. I'm caching the HTML file and the image. So that's now available to me. If I go offline now and go back to the home page, I can refresh this because this is still the static cache, but now I can also go to the first movie and to the second one. And of course, if I go to the next one, I haven't got anything for that to show, so I'm showing the offline. Already a better experience, right? Some heads are nodding. Okay, well, we can do better, we can do better. I agree. But we have this problem, static v1, static v2. We're going to solve that in a minute. And in a minute means now. We're going to clean up our caches. Because the problem is we don't really know which file from which, well, we do know which file we want to have from that static cache, maybe an image or a JavaScript file, but we don't really know which cache the user will use. Will it use v1 or v2? We have no idea. It's like a little gamble. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we clear out old caches that we don't need to use anymore. As I said, static v1, static v2, and dynamic v1. We had this activate event listener already. And we're going to put something extra in there. As soon as a new service worker is activated, we're going to go through all the caches. And that's what we can do with caches.keys. And a key is essentially the version of that cache, the name of that cache. So if you look at the line between, below keys.map, we're just going to check whether the current key we have, the current version number, isn't the same like the one we have for static cache or the one for dynamic cache. And if it's not the same, we're just going to say, kill it. We don't need it anymore. And also I have a demo for that, of course. So refresh, new service worker, click OK. And did you see it? We only have static v2 and dynamic v1 now. Cool, we're clean. That's good. All right, let me take a sip. Are you okay with the code, with all the code you're seeing now? Still able to process it? Good, 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 good. You don't have to, I'm not gonna rehearse you after this talk. You don't have to remember it. You can always find it in the slides, of course, and in the GitHub project. All right, ready for more? Yeah. Prefetching. Because what we did until now was like a user goes to a page, we're gonna put that stuff in the cache so we can reuse it later. But what if we can, well, pretend to think what the user is going to visit next and make sure that we have those files available as well? That's something we can do with prefetching. It also it does what it says. You download content in the background based on the assumption that the content will likely be requested. Let's do that. A way to do it is having this in your header. So link rel is prefetch with the URL you want to prefetch. So what we can do is go over the page and create all, we have a method to create a prefetch link that we will inject into the head. And to do that, we're gonna create a linked list with all the links that are on the page, and you're gonna shove them all in the header. So it will look something like this. That's not really feasible, right? If you have many links on your page, this is a lot. And by the way, this doesn't help either. Safari doesn't support that. And I think prefetching is very nice if you're on a spotty connection on the road with your iPhone or your Android device. Well, Android does it, but iOS doesn't. So let's skip this way of prefetching. Let's do something I call optimized prefetch. So we're still going to make a linked list. Are we? Is that smart? Because my page only has the links to the movies. But what if you have links to your terms and conditions, your social media, all the other crap nobody cares about? You don't want to prefetch that, right? That doesn't make sense. So maybe it's wise to use some data attributes on your links. And a data attribute is a nice way to make sure that your attribute on, in this case, a link, is unique, and always use the data dash prefix for that. You can totally also create your own attributes without the data prefix. But what if in the near or the far future, HTML decides to add the attribute that's exactly how you called it, then your website will be broken. So always make sure that you use the data dash prefix, because that's what they're for. So I can do this, for instance. On, I don't know, share on X or whatever, I can set data dash skip dash prefetch. What I then can do is, well, I just select all the links that don't have that data skip prefetch attribute in them. Is that really a good idea? Because what if your homepage, I only have, what is it, 5 or 6 links to the movies? What if you have a movie page about, I don't know, what's a long-running series? Fast and the Furious, some other crap movies, I don't know. But maybe you have a ton of links there. That doesn't really make sense as well, right? That's too much. Well, there's a solution for that, of course. And it's called the Intersection Observer API. And that's a very nice way to make sure that we only gonna prefetch the links when it's coming into the viewport. So if a user is scrolling through our website, and in our case we encounter a link, then we say, hey, let's go prefetch that. But maybe the user is gonna click on it. The way how it works is that we create a new intersection observer and we feed them some entries. And for each entry, it will look like it will check whether the intersection ratio is 1. That means, in our case, the link is in the viewport. It is visible on the screen. And if it is, we're going to fetch it from the server. And I'm adding cache no store here because I want to bypass the, say, the normal browser cache. I want to have it for myself. I'm going to go back to that intersection observer, of course. But I'm creating the link list again with the data skip prefetch. And for each link in that linked list, I'm going to feed it to the observer. And one thing I need to do is to check whether I already prefetched it. Because if a user goes scrolling up and down, for instance, you don't want to prefetch the same URL 3, 4, 5 times. That doesn't make sense, right? It's a waste of battery, it's a waste of data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a storage mechanism in the browser that's called local storage. And that means that it will write something to that local storage and it will be available the next time the user, maybe after a week, comes back to your website again. So I'm going to check whether it's already there with local storage.getItem. And I'm going to just feed it the URL I want to use. And if it's not fetched yet, we're going to fetch it in the next gray line. But I'm also going to put an item in the local storage and saying, oh, hey, I fetched this URL. And to make it pretty later on, I'm not only saving the URL, but I'm also saving the text that's inside that link. So I can reuse it later on. All right. Because I was messing around with my service worker, it's good to also update this version. Let's see how that works. So I'm going to refresh, get a new service worker again, saying, I'm fine with this. I have a static v3 as well. The static v2 is killed because it's not there. But let's see what happens if we're scrolling. Boom, there we go. Jurassic Park 3 from 2001 is cached, is prefetched, let's say. And the 2015 one as well, Jurassic World. That's cool. And if you look in the local storage, you now can see, although we didn't have to prefetch it, we have the values here for the other ones as well. So we have the URL, that's the key, and we have the value there, that's the link text. Almost there. Something to consider, again, with prefetching. What if the user has a very terrible connection? A slow 2G, that's GPRS, I think, even. Do you really want to prefetch everything for that user? Because it probably takes a lot of time, isn't really effective. So that's something you could also add into your strategy of prefetching. However, this only works on Android. Safari and iOS don't support it, but it can still be a nice way of making sure the user gets the best experience, because it will take time, of course, and it will interfere a little bit with the website, with the page you're already watching. Another one that's really something you need to consider is whether a user has turned on the save data switch in their mobile device. Because that means there might be, for instance, here in Sweden, but are not in the EU, so they have to buy a data package, for instance. I'm from the Netherlands. I can use my data package here in Sweden, no problem. But if you're from a different country, maybe overseas from I don't know, Australia or the US, you have to buy a data package. And it depends where you are, but usually they're not cheap and they are very small. So what you can also incorporate in that prefetching is, well, if save data is on, maybe I shouldn't prefetch. So consider that as well. And of course, this only works on Android, for now. Hopefully Safari will catch up on that, because that's a really valuable one. Okay, so we're prefetching, we have an offline page, we are dynamic caching, we have some static caching, but let's make it that final step. Let's make it even better. So we have this offline page and say, well, but why don't you try one of our other pages? And it redirects you to the home page, and good luck clicking a link, hopefully it's there or not. We can do better, because now we have in our local storage, we know what we have cached. So instead of saying, well, go to our homepage, and say, well, hey, these pages are offline available for you. And we're going to fill that next to the homepage, because we know it's there, that's our static cache. We're going to add some extra list items here. For that, I need another JavaScript file. I can put it in the app.js as well, but I thought let's make an offline.js file for that. So I'm putting it in our static cache because I want to have it available. All right. So now in our service worker, in our fetch event listener, we're going to do something extra. First of all, we're going to say, well, we want to save the dynamic version in local storage, because we have no idea what our dynamic storage is called at this point. So if that's true, so that's usually the first time a fetch event happens, we're going to send a message to the client, and the client in this case is your website. So we can pick that up with another JavaScript file from our website. So the service worker that runs separately still can send a message to your, say, your normal JavaScript. And we do that with client.post message. And the message we're sending here is an object with action that can be any string you like. I chose for set dynamic version in local storage. And another attribute I've added that's called dynamic, and that holds the version of the dynamic cache, dynamic-v1. And then, of course, I will set the variable to false to make sure that we only do this once. Now in our app.js, we're going to listen to that message getting from the service worker. So navigator.serviceworker.add-event-listener message. We can send different messages, but in this case, we're checking whether the action is the set dynamic version in local storage. And if it is that, we're doing the same with, like we did with the URLs. We're going to set an item, dynamic cache, with the version number that we are getting from that data. All right, still here? Almost done. Don't worry. This is our last part that we need to do. We have the offline.js. And we want to retrieve all the cached URLs that we have in our local storage. So first of all, we're going to get the dynamic cache version to make sure that we know which file is there, or which dynamic cache we need to target. We're going to open the cache, and next off, we were going to check whether the key, so the URL, matches what we have in our local storage. We're only going to look at the HTML files, because that's interesting. And we're going to ignore the offline.html, because we don't really need it. And after that, we create a cache list that gets all the URLs that are fetched from the dynamic cache in this case. And we're going to create a list item with a link inside of it. And in that link, we're going to make sure that the link text is there as well. It's a lot of code just to create a list item with a link, but hey, it is what it is. And in the end, we append every URL that we got. So let's see how that works. We refreshed it. We said it's OK. Now in our static v4, we have our offline.js, so we know it's possible to work with that. Let's click some links. Well, let's have a look at the service worker and put it offline. We already cached some stuff, right? So this still works, because that was in the dynamic cache. This still works as well, dynamic cache. We prefetched the next one, so we don't have the image. You can add that as well, but I chose only to prefetch the HTML. And let's say we go to Fallen Kingdom. We didn't cache that yet, so it's Jurassic Park is closed. But if you scroll up, you can see these are the pages that are available, that are cached already. So now a user can still go through these pages as well. There are multiple other ways to cache stuff and have cache strategies. This is one of them. I didn't include anything about API calls. That's a whole different beast. But you can also say, well, I'm just going to use it first from the service worker, still going to fetch it from the server, and if they're different, I'm going to replace it with a new one. Or the other way around. I'm going to the server. If it takes too long, I'm giving the one from the service worker. So there are multiple ways to deal with this. All right, heads are full of code. Let's relax a little bit with this commercial from Jeep. I think it was from 2015 for the then new Jurassic Park movie.
Pet dinosaur? Don't worry, I'll take care of you.
That's not a good idea.
Nice and quiet. Hey, look, it's your mom. Hot dog?
Before it gets too bloody, let's stop that. I want to say thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. The QR codes will bring you to a page on my website with the slides already there in PDF. And you can also click through some images that are also all the slides, and a link to the GitHub project, which you are free to check out, do whatever you want with it, and especially learn from it, I would say. So thank you very much, and I hope you have another great, well, part of the afternoon and tomorrow morning as well, and enjoy the party tonight. Thank you.